25 to 35, if not 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts. It's going to destroy visibility at times. You can experience whiteout conditions in some of the heavy bands. Look what we see for future visibilities. By the time this is showing 9:30 in the morning, same sort of setup, like around 7 or 8 in the morning as well. But you're down to a quarter mile in New York City, New Brunswick, 3/10 in Brentwood. Keep in mind, a quarter mile or less merits a dense fog advisory, and there's not any fog in the area. This is all because of the snow that is blowing out there. Just want to show you the biggest snowfall projection that I heard is saying 9.8 in the
Starting mic check.
Hello.
All right, good evening, everyone. I want to take the time to thank all of you for attending, especially our community board chairpersons and borough hall staff. And thank you, Colette. This evening, the board will receive a presentation from our budget director, Iraq Kanaski. The presentation will review the proposed fiscal year 25 levels of various city agencies and compare them to FY 24 adopted budget. 2 weeks ago, our office held its FY 25 Queens Borough Board budget hearing. I want to thank our and our fiscal team for all of their hard work on the budget hearing, and I want to thank the Queens community for the testimonies. I feel like it was like almost 200 people. Pursuant to the city charter, the Borough Board must submit its budget priorities each year to the mayor, the New York City Council, and the city's Office of Management and Budget. We have a lot of material to cover, so I ask that we please hold our questions or comments until the presentation is completed. After the presentation, the board will vote on its package of budget priorities for fiscal year 2024. Colette and the community board team will conduct the votes after our Q&A session. The floor is now yours, Iraq, and I want to thank you for all of the extremely hard work that you've done in getting us here today. And want to thank certainly our fiscal team for the work. And thank all of you certainly for giving your recommendations. We hope to make you proud today. So I'll turn it over to Iraq.
Thank you so much, VP. Is this a good volume for all, or should I be closer? Close microphone. So, I'm gonna start the presentation. This is the presentation is a summarized version of what you have printed out in your book. There might be some agencies that do not appear in this presentation, but it's because they don't have grand changes from last year to this year, but we can go over them at the moment at time of comments. For some reason, my notes are not coming up, but that's fine. Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. Slideshow. I don't know what's happening. Sorry for this, a little tech hiccup. Okay, this works. Perfect. Okay, so as I said, this is a summarized version. And since I sent the last digital version, we've been finding a few discrepancies. So the version is singular and the version are slightly different in the numbers of population that we use for two charts. Those were as well as some recommendations that do not appear on the bottom part of the agencies, but everything has been corrected on what you have in front of you now. With that said, let's start. The fiscal year 2025 preliminary budget outlines a spending plan that forecasts. Omar is not moving here. What is happening? Oh, okay, it's a clicker. Wait, okay. There you go. So it's forecasting 109.4 billion. The forecast $75 billion, which 32.2 billion are coming from property tax, 17.02 billion are coming from personal income tax, and 10.4 billion are coming from sales tax. When it comes to federal and state grants, the city is forecasting a revenue of 7.7 billion and 18.8 billion, respectively. That means, these are the funding streams that the city's right now expecting. So going directly into the meat of this, we're gonna start with the, as you can see here, this budget is forecasted at $5.4 million. You're gonna see in the charts, it's gonna say the money's in thousands. So that means that you need to add 3 more zeros. This is for easier digestion. The $million of the BP represent a decrease of $732,000. Mostly, this difference, and I already detected a math error here. Is 146 less than last year. So this is a huge part of our agency, given that part of our operating budget goes for something that is our expense grant fund that allow us to provide a small dollar fund for nonprofits throughout Queens. If we don't have enough money for our OTPS, we won't be able to provide those same funding levels. And these organizations help us with very basic needs in the communities, which is food insecurity, senior services, and such. So that's a big concern for us. That's why, as you can tell, why is it not moving this? I don't like this thing. Oh my, there you go. Perfect. Okay. As you can tell, right now our budget represents the OTPS line, which is supposed to include the funds that I'm talking about 14% of the whole amount. Comparatively, for other previous years, we always have about 73 to 27 ratio of spending. Therefore, give us another problem here, as always, and this is an issue that we continue to push, and we've been complaining and saying and hearing that our per capita funds comparatively to other boroughs is the lowest of the 5, even though we are the second largest population and also the expected population to grow and surpass Brooklyn's in the next few years. So clearly, this is it's not good for our borough. But however, I do want to commend the work that we do here with all your support, because what we have, we'd make it work.
And I think amongst all the borough presidents, we're having conversation around the formula because we get a lot of capital money here, probably more. Actually, we get more than any other borough president. So there's going to be a lot of push and pull this year on the formula conversation as we go in to meet with the mayor in the days to come. And I'm hoping now the borough president complain about the formula, because if we complain about the formula, Queens would win this battle. So I'm trying to balance this amongst a lot of the capital priorities we have, because we get more, for instance, capital than Brooklyn, although quote unquote Brooklyn has quote unquote a higher population. But what I would also argue is that with the influx of migrants, which Queens has taken in more than anyone else, not that I'm complaining, we will do what we need to do. We want to push to make sure that this formula is corrected. So we look forward to a conversation with the speaker in the days to come on this, but absolutely, we're being shortchanged based, and there's no reason Staten Island, especially, sorry, I don't care if the press is watching, how is Staten Island getting more per capita than Queens with a population of 2.4 million people? So I understand the politics because it's all political. A lot of this, the headwinds we face come from challenges or politics from back before I was borough president, probably 20 years before I was borough president. But we want to look to continue to make progress in fixing a lot of the inequities for this borough. So ongoing conversations, not easy, because once again, we do receive more on other ends, but the bottom line is with the population growth, with the influx of migrants, we should certainly see more in that per capita support.
Thank you, VP. And I have to say, the numbers here are, we base this off the last census. So it's been a few years already, and most likely the numbers are already.
But the other borough presidents complain that we get so much capital. So I'm trying to balance everything, because capital is in a sense, our bread and butter in terms of supporting our hospitals, our parks, our schools. So I don't take that lightly in terms of making sure that we see institutional improvements, but that doesn't mean that per capita, per person, we shouldn't see more support, especially if I have 50,000 migrants in my care at the moment, more than any other borough.
Great. And therefore, given this, Omar está funcionando. No me está funcionando. I don't know what's happening. Which one? Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Do you want me to press it? Put it in pause.
No, it's fine. Oh, yeah, there you go. Perfect. Okay, so our recommendations is increasing the agency's budget to better serve our borough of Queens, and restore and increase the agency budget on the other than personal services line. This will allow us to continue do the work that we've been doing so far. Now going to something that you should be very interested in is the community boards itself. Comparatively from last fiscal year, community boards in Queens are experiencing a $22,000 cut on the personal services line and an increase of $2,000 on OTPS, which is other than personal services. This overall reflects is a 20,000 budget cut from the previous fiscal year that was adopted back in June. So again, this is a big concern to us because we understand that the work that you all do. As you can tell here, per capita, again, and this is gonna sound very depressing throughout the presentation. Most agencies will reflect the same. You continue to serve the residents of Queens with way less money than other boroughs. You know, Bronx has $2 per resident, and you can read your numbers yourself. Therefore, the recommendations that we came up with so far, and also taking into consideration a lot of the things that were brought up during the hearing 2 weeks ago, is fully restore and enhance the funding for Queens Community Boards, fund the top priorities of each community board, which you provided with the community board register, and all of those are at the end of the packet that you have. It's an annex. You will see all the community board's top priorities. As well, provide funding for live broadcasting services of each community board. We understand that you all want to be able to reach more of your constituents, and clearly that's a need that we need.
And that's going to be an ask of all the borough presidents who we're communicating with, who all feel extremely, feel the same way about this issue in terms of making sure that we have broadcasting. Many of you have come to us for like individual funding. We just don't have it. We have a big tent to feed. So we are collectively going to speak to the mayor about this, and God willing, we'll make some headway this year. But it's a shame that we're having this conversation. We know during the pandemic, when many of you started to do live broadcasting, you saw an increase in public participation. It's something we want to continue to see grow. And I know many of you have asked us, well, why don't you just fund it? We just don't have the capacity with the current cuts that are coming down our way. But certainly we believe the mayor should want to do this in terms of making sure we have more transparency and accountability in public participation during the board process. So it feels like, we're saying the same thing every year. God willing, we will make some progress this year. But I want you to know all the borough presidents share the same sentiments.
Thank you. Thank you, VP. Department of Education, we're going to go next. They're experiencing a budget cut of $24.5 thousand about. Their total funding for this upcoming fiscal year so far is $31 billion, over almost 31.5 billion. And comparably, education continues to experience budget cuts, and that should not be it. But as you can tell, they get an increase on personnel services, which is meaning that at least our teachers will continue to be employed and not having any issues. But on the OTPS line, they're getting, a big cut of almost a little over $500,000. So, half a billion. Yeah, sorry. I appreciate that.
And there should be no cuts technically there, and that's what you hear the state elected officials actually raising in light of the governor really putting, to resolve the CFE issue, campaign for fiscal equity, with this increase in funding to our public schools, especially, there should relatively be no cuts to the education budget. So I think she's reing up like another billion, but our state partners have really been efficient and effective in restoring a lot of cuts that no governor has ever put towards education. And we don't believe there should be any educational cuts. And the mayor is actually facing headwinds at the state level as he looks for mayoral control, partly because the state has put up money. We should see no cuts in education. And we're not just, sitting on our laurels here. We just allocated $30 million towards schools across the budget, across the borough. There should be no cuts to education with the amount of state funding that has come down the pipeline. And even if we wanted to say, well, there's lower enrollment in the public schools, we know that's not factual, because once again, Queens is seeing the largest influx of migrants, which means that more students, there was quote unquote lower enrollment at one point in the public schools, but we're seeing higher enrollment, especially with the influx of migrants in Queens. And I was just visiting a school in South Jamaica this morning who is seeing a large influx of migrants come in. They're not complaining. These students are beautiful students doing the work, wanting to learn, and there should be relatively no reason that we're seeing budget cuts. And quite frankly, even if there are going to be cuts, there should be no cuts to Queens, being that we're seeing and we're shouldering, and I don't want to call it a burden, but we're shouldering the influx. So that's my position this year in terms of all cuts, as Queens should see none.
As you can tell, SCA and DOE came up with a capital plan to address certain, these investments that have been done in schools through Queens and through the city for years. One of the things that they're trying to address is called the capacity program, is to expand seats, because historically, and those who've been in this type of presentations in the past, we've been missing seats throughout. So you have a chart with the school district, and in total through September 2024 through 2027, they want to increase 11,807 seats throughout Queens. And you can, see that how they're divided by.
And let me add on that we do see, and SCA is making some substantial progress in building new high school seats here. And we continue to work with them. But once again, Queens is going to be the borough where we see the most growth. So from Willits Point, for instance, where we will see a new school, to Long Island City, to the Rockaways, whether it's public or charter, one of the two, we're continuing to work with SCA. I am confident, and I do know that Queens will see the most growth in school seats, but the idea is to make sure we don't see any cuts, that we only continue to see growth, especially on high school seats, which is where the need is really. So I know Northern Boulevard will be cutting the ribbon on a new school sooner than later. But there's a lot of work to be done in terms of growth for our borough and school seats.
Thank you.
It's almost done. Yeah, I know, I passed by. It looks good.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of work to make sure it didn't look like Rikers Island, and happy to say that looks much different. It looks really good. So proud of the work of our community board partners on that school, which will actually be a film school, which is great. Hillside Avenue, we have one coming, and like I said, we're continuing to work collectively where we see the growth and the need for the seats, school seats to grow seats. But Queens will see more seats than any other borough, which is already budgeted, which is good, but we don't want to let our foot off the pedal.
Yeah, and we need to recognize SCA has been a good partner to us, and well, personally, I enjoy working with them. So recommendations from the board on the DOE budget is dedicate capital funds for the construction and expansion of elementary and middle schools. Dedicate capital funds for the construction and expansion of high schools. Increase expense funding for Queens schools. Increase access to technology for students. And something that, based on experience, we've been funding some hydroponic labs through some schools in Queens. We believe that that's a great tool to invest in STEM programming, and hydroponic labs is a great opportunity for children.
And not only STEM, but also food access. So one of the first ones we funded was at Far Rockaway High School, which is great, where children get to, obviously learn about hydroponics, but also grow food and give to food pantries and also take home if they're in need. So it is our hope, and we'll talk a lot more about this in the state of the borough, to make sure every school, and that is probably the most popular request we get here. Every school wants a hydroponics lab. So it is our hope to really grow that and to build out hydroponic labs in every single school in Queens.
Exactly. And that's why we want to create a budget line for schools to invest in the creation of these type of labs. Additionally, we want to continue the city council initiatives. As always, they're an important part of the whole curriculum of every school. Now we're gonna pass to the Department for the Aging. In this budget, so far there's a 36.7 thousand 36,000, so it's million. So sorry, I get a little twisted in the brain. 36.7 million dollars of budget cuts so far, and most of them come from senior centers and meals, where they're cutting up 26 million dollars from that program, as well from senior services, another 15 million. So, concerning, we'll fight those cuts. Generally speaking, on key programming from the department, which is like the NORC, social adult services, home delivery meals, there's no big change besides a good increase on home delivery meals contracts, which is, working with our partners. And geriatric mental health is getting a small cut of $68,000, which is small in the grand scheme of things, but it's not small when people stop getting some services, right? So the recommendations is restoring, enhancing funding for senior services, restore and enhance for senior services through the Borough President Discretionary Fund. Every year we get a small pot of money that allows us to provide extra funding for senior services organizations. So we always want to be able to.
And let me add to that, Speaker Adams was very helpful because that pot was cut. And one of the most important parts about us getting senior funding on the borough president side is that we have a lot more flexibility than what council members have. So we do help to fill a lot of the gaps that council members can't fund on the senior services side. So we're going to look forward to going back to the council to ask them to restore that funding once again. But, before we got here, remember, this pot was cut. And I want to thank Speaker Adams for restoring it, which allows us to fund close to 15 or 20 senior centers across the borough.
And a very great initiative that we want to push this year is increasing funding to ensure senior centers are open at least 6 days a week. We understand that is a big resource for our seniors to age in place, healthy and socializing. So that's another push that we want to explore this year. And as well, continue all the council initiatives that they already fund. So this.
Question at the end, Frank. Question there.
Yes, please take notes of your questions. I'm trying to go a little faster here, so I don't bore you with my numbers. So the Department of Youth and Community Development, you might see that I skip an agency. There was not big changes on the previous agency, so I wanted to take the time to talk about this one a little bit more. So far, the new fiscal year 25 preliminary budget is budgeting this agency at $1.1 billion, sorry, $1.1 billion. That is a budget cut of 234 million which is, it's a huge problem because the things that are being cut so far is adult literacy, community development programs, in-school youth programs, other youth programs that includes Compass and programs like Compass, and as well, out of school programming. This and summer employment is getting another big cut. So this is concerning because these are the type of activities that help us reduce, crime in the future and help us keep our youth entertained and learning and motivated. So definitely, it's always concerning to see cuts to this agency. Therefore, we want to recommend the increased funding for summer youth employment, fund universal after-school programs, restore and enhance funding for out-of-school youth programs in Queens, increase funding for additional staff tasked with executing discretionary fund contracts, because the number one complaint that we get of our partners, nonprofits, is when they work with this DYCD, is the time that it takes to register contracts and get the funding flowing. So also we want to restore funding for adult literacy and continue city council initiatives.
And let me add on youth. We're seeing more young people delving back into incarceration than ever. So these cuts are extremely harmful to our communities. More young people are locked up. And there's an article today, I don't know, I can't remember if it's the Times or Daily News, on youth incarceration. So you want to prevent youth from being incarcerated. The number one way to do that is to make sure we take preventative measures and ensuring that they have opportunities for after-school programming, for out-of-school programming, for summer youth.
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting to see those numbers creep up. We need to get a breakdown by borough. But with raise the age, there certainly is that correlation of some of our young people certainly being charged with more gun possessions and other things. And we want to make sure that this programming is preserved to keep them out of the justice system.
Thank you. Now, next, we're going to go to the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. So far, the department is being budgeted at $2 billion. That is $136 million of cut, almost 137. Yeah, it's a huge cut, and the things that are being cut so far is disease prevention and treatment. We just went through a huge pandemic, and we're not investing in those. Center for Health Equity, environmental health, epidemiology, family and child health, and mental hygiene are the ones with the biggest cuts. Again, very, very concerning given the times that we've already passed through and lived. And after this, one thing that we like to do is how many hospital beds do we have? Again, I told you it's not a very pretty picture. Queens continues to be the one, the borough with less beds per 1,000 residents, with 1.6, and the rest are above 2 and 5 in Manhattan. So we are severely underbedded. So therefore, we want to have several recommendations to HCC, the DOHMA, sorry, which is increase expense and capital funding to support Queens HCC hospitals, funding for healthy hospitals, operate Article 28 freestanding healthcare facilities, funding for new trauma centers, which is going to help us, not saturate our hospital beds if we can treat it somewhere else. As well, funding more prenatal and birthing centers, funding for food pantries within H&H facilities, restore, enhance disease prevention treatment, Center for Health Equity, mental hygiene, environmental health, and family and child health funding. And as well, continue the city council initiatives.
And let me add on that, we made significant progress in making sure that we try to correct many of the inequities that our hospitals have faced. So just making sure that from Elmhurst Hospital to Queens Hospital to Jamaica Hospital to St. John's Hospital, that we're providing those capital funds. One of the things we requested from all our hospitals is expansion plans, because the state is not building new hospitals as much as people say build a new hospital. Anybody following the science sees that hospitals are closing. The AG is fighting what is it? Beth Israel in Manhattan, I believe. So we're trying to hold on to what we have, but we want to also plan for the future, and especially with the projected growth in the borough, we want to continue to see our institutions grow. So many of our institutions are in the process of figuring out plans on what does that growth look like. We understand that it won't be simply a city solution. We're going to need the state to step in. But I'm proud of the hospitals who really are stepping up to make sure that they get creative on growth. And I want to commend many of our hospitals in Queens who are trying to find the space. So we'll be, for instance, cutting or breaking ground in the days to come at Mount Sinai, for instance. I think I got that right. Mount Sinai in Astoria,
Yes.
right? So they've figured out creative ways to create more bed space, and that's something we're funding on our end. But we understand that we're going to need a lot more. So Elmhurst is creating a blueprint, and we requested a lot of our hospitals to really think about being creative and figuring out space, but also thinking about expansion plans moving into the future. So a lot of work to be done there. Obviously, the trauma center for the Rockaways continues to be a huge priority. But like I said, there's no magic bullet in getting these things funded. We're trying to hold on to what we have during this moment. There's not a lot of federal dollars coming down. And the state is, just dredging along and trying to hold on to what we have. So a lot of work continues in this space, but we're doing all we can to make sure we build out and just support the institutions in the borough who really need the upgrades.
Yes. Thank you, VP. Next, we're gonna go to the fire department. There's they're having experience a budget cut for fiscal year 25 of $27 million on a little over 27.6 billion dollars on OTPS. That means, for all the extra materials they need. Personnel services, thankfully, is being funded a little bit more than last year, $254 million more. Why? So this is a very quick agency. Like, we obviously need to ensure that the funding for FDNY personnel continues to increase. To expand the first response station in Roosevelt Island, reopen Engine 261 in Western Queens, create a Rockaway Peninsula Ladder Company, expand the number of EMTs, and funding for generators, as always, because there's always a great need for that. Next, we're going to go to a big agency, the NYPD. As you can tell, they're not getting any funding cuts this projected preliminary budget.
Let me add on that. So when you hear people say the NYPD is getting cuts, it's just a lie. There are never any cuts technically to the NYPD.
Yeah.
And as a former public safety chair, I will say there's a lot that continues to be done around overtime and the abuse of overtime. But relatively, the NYPD never sees, as much as people will say, well, the NYPD's budget is getting cut anytime. If we looked at the overtime growth that continues to happen, the overtime abuse, because there's no other way to put it, there are ways to streamline overtime. For instance, if you have a block party, you have 40 officers. No offense, I'm not saying we don't need 40 officers, but there's no need for 40 officers for a five-party block party. So we need to rein in the overtime. And this is not just my opinion. The Independent Office of Budget continues to say the same thing. And it's really, we need to rein it in. We don't need 20 officers for 5 people at a block party who are just standing around. So a lot of work that continues need to be there. Public safety, we understand is critical. We're building the 160 precinct, which we will open come the fall. Obviously the 109 is getting hit hard. Am I right? 109.
Yes, the 109.
109 is probably the precinct that's driving my crime in Queens.
Yeah.
And relatively, we do believe that they do need a new precinct up there. to divide the tasks similar to what we did with the 116th to try to make sure that we have enough coverage. But the bottom line is we still need to rein in overtime.
Yes.
And there are no cuts at NYPD once again.
Yeah, no, definitely. And something you have the stats from 2022 and 2023 in your books. They're here.
The North is driving our crime in Queens, not the South. The South continues to see drops in crime, so now it's the North. And really the 109 GLAs continue to be a big problem, grand larceny auto. And we're now seeing more of an increase in that in the southern part. And the DA has assured us, DA Katz has assured us that they're focusing in on this issue, and God willing, we'll see some news on that in the days to come.
And this takes us to the recommendations of NYPD, which is increase the number of neighborhood coordinator officers. We know this is a program that has shown promising.
And not just increasing the number on neighborhood coordination officers, but actually running an effective program. Before the pandemic, the NCO program was a godsend to us because we were seeing individuals who are not naturally part of civic associations or community boards really come out and participate in neighborhood solutions. We've seen, I don't know what the NYPD has not seemed to prioritize this program, but I want to say that we made a lot of progress with the NCO program, and it's something we brought up to the former police commissioner, new police commissioner, that they need to focus in on again. But to me, the NCO program is non-existent. We're not seeing the same
engagement,
confidence in it, the same promotion of it, the same steady hand that we saw in the past on it, which was a good thing.
Thank you.
I don't want to say we don't have enough officers. The issue is that they had assigned officers. Even when we had the NCO program, they got promoted real fast. And I'm not saying I don't want good officers promoted, but they should stagnate the time before people are promoted. But absolutely, the NCO program, in my opinion, has disappeared. Every once in a while we get a flyer NCO, but it's not what we're not reaching the goal we intended to when this program first started. There was a lot of momentum around it. You don't really see it these days.
And our second recommendation will be to build a new precinct to help reduce the coverage area of the 109th precinct, which we mentioned is bringing the stats up just because of the large land portion that have to cover. Next, we're going to pass to sanitation. Sanitation doesn't have too many budget cuts. However, it does
have cuts. The mayor reverse cuts.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Council.
So definitely. And then as of this document, so far, general administration has a $37.1 million cut. Snow removal, which technically we were not experiencing snow and tomorrow we're gonna have huge snow. We'll see how that goes. It's gonna be $10.3 million cut, as well as waste disposal and waste prevention, reuse, and recycling, which includes, composting and other programs as such. It's having a $9 million cut. The total cut DCNY is experiencing is $19.5 million. And their total projected funding for next year is $1.8 billion. So our recommendations for this agency funding will be increase the cleanup of major commercial corridors. We know that's the lifeblood of our communities. Increase garbage and recycling pickup throughout the borough. Restore and enhance funding for waste prevention, reuse, and recycling. Increase e-waste recycling. Increase funding to expand community composting programs, and continue city council initiatives.
On community composting, so we still have composting at the first borough who had composting, but the community composting definitely got zeroed out. So we're pushing for them to restore that.
And now we're gonna pass to HPD. HPD, the Housing Preservation Development, is experiencing budget cuts on administration programs, and general administration, and preservation, lead paint, and preservation of other agency services. It's it's not it thankfully, the agency has not experienced a significant decrease in funding compared to other years. That gave us these kind of results. This is our stats from 2022. But it seems that Queens is starting to lead the creation of housing as of now. And in this agency, we were getting there. So as of 2022, the total housing units completed in Queens were 7,319, which is at 28% of the 100%. That is 25,936 units built throughout the city. So as of 22, we were like building towards it, and now I think BP we were in a much better place when it comes to.
And in 2023, we added over 4,000 units. So Queens continues to lead the city, even though I don't know if that Brooklyn number is correct, but because I believe in 2022, we saw more housing creation in Brooklyn. So we should triple check that figure.
Will do.
But definitely 2022, 2023, we definitely continue to outpace the rest of the city. More people want to move to Queens than anywhere else. So there's a lot of work, and I anticipate this year we'll continue to see that growth between Willets Point, between Rockaways, between Jamaica, between Long Island City. But we still need a lot more. And once again, just looking at the numbers, this is minuscule based on the challenges we have, right? I mean, I have 50,000 migrants in care. We had 40,000 folks in shelter. So these numbers do nothing to really resolve the crisis we're facing. But I'm hoping that this year, and once again, we're in very close communication with HPD, with the state on Creedmoor's former site as well, because there's no way that as much as we get complaints about shelters popping up in neighborhoods, absolutely, you're going to have shelters and hotels used because more than 50% of our residents are spending more than 50% of their income on rent. That's more than half of their income on average. So with that comes the challenges of people moving into the shelter system. So we definitely want to continue to see this number and more units being financed here. Obviously, we have more tools with mandatory inclusionary housing. And I want to thank all the community boards who've been helpful in this, having difficult dialogues, but we have to build absolutely more housing in Queens. And we need to see those units. It's not just about approving a ULURP, but it's about ensuring that those units are also financed from. So whether it's Innovation Queens, whether it's the rezonings in Long Island City and downtown Jamaica, we need to see these units financed, not just necessarily an approval happening. Willets Point obviously will be the largest affordable housing development we do in the city in over 40 years with over 2,400 units. But even for that, the first phase is finance. We're going to look to make sure the second and third phases are also financed to make sure that we can get shovels in the ground to make sure that we're chipping away at especially the formerly homeless. And I like to remind folks that those who are in the shelters also work. You have teachers in the shelter systems who work, and it's a shame that we have city workers who are living in shelter because they can't afford to live in their neighborhoods or afford to live in the borough. So our main push is to make sure that units are being financed in Queens, and obviously mandatory inclusionary housing and homeless set-asides are continuing to work at chipping away at the housing crisis.
And we came up with some recommendations for HPD: is create and preserve more affordable housing in Queens, continue housing supportive services to residents in the areas impacted by Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Ida, and other tropical storms, because sadly the hurricanes are not the only problem we're experiencing now with this. Allocate funding for eviction prevention programs, enhance funding for foreclosure prevention, and increase funds for supportive housing, as well continue city council initiatives.
And Queens continues to see more foreclosures than any other borough. So that's a very important piece there as well.
We will be passing now to Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation is being budgeted at $1.4 billion for this upcoming fiscal year so far. That is a they're experiencing some cuts, particularly in traffic planning, safety, and administration. That is a $46.2 million cut. Um, Overall, the department is not getting too many cuts. However, this is significant just because Queens and I can speak for a story, which is Community War One. We experienced a lot of deaths with traffic, sadly. So we come up with some recommendations. Increase the number of slow zones, install more pedestrian and countdown crosswalk signals, expedite the implementation of daylight measures to heavy transit zones in Queens, create more open space where it makes sense, increase capital funds to resurface streets, sidewalks, and curbs, increase funding for traffic studies, repair or build new seawalls and bulkheads, invest capital funding to create and improve protected bike lanes, and as well as continue city council initiatives. After this, we're going to Queens Public Library, which is one of the agencies that is experiencing a lot of problems. Right now, Queens Borough Public Libraries has a budget cut of $15 million, comparatively from fiscal year 24. And here I created a little chart for you all of the fiscal year 23, which is the first 4 months of fiscal year 23, which was July 2022. So that's the information that we have available to us. Queens Public Libraries, you can see the average weekly schedule hours were 45 versus 45 now, which is a good thing that we kind of improved it. The attendance increased. The libraries opened, it was only 3% of our libraries in Queens are open 7 days a week. And now, in fiscal year 24, we managed to get a 90% of libraries open 6 days a week. However, with recent budget cuts, the 6th day had to be closed now. So one of the things that we're trying to push as recommendations is increase the expense funding support to provide expanded 7-day services for Queens Public Libraries, increase programmatic funding for ESL courses, because we all know that our libraries are more than just a library. It's a community center, it's a educational center, it's a lot of things. Also increase capital funding to support Queens Borough Public Libraries, because we need severe improvements throughout. However, last fiscal year we made a very good investment to libraries. It was about
on expansions for just about every library in Queens. We fully funded, close all the gaps that they had, which was, it was 17 million. I forget.
Yeah, it was about 17 million. It was like
about 17 million.
It was like 12.
So any expansions that will linger, and we close those gaps, which is why they didn't come back for a capital ask this year to us.
Yes, and we'll make sure to tell them that. This Department of Cultural Affairs is a big concern right now, particularly for the CIGs. I'll explain that in a moment. The personal services budget line is getting a small increase of $295,000. OTPS, they're getting a $97 million cut, which brings the total of the funding to $144 million for the Queens, for the Department of Cultural Affairs in Queens. As you can tell, we have CIGs, which is cultural. What are CIGs? Institution groups. Yep. So we have 8 of them here in Queens, which is these ones. All of them are experiencing budget cuts, which is super concerning. This brings a total of $4 billion cuts almost.
And we're gonna fight these cuts. One from a jobs career aspect. These are good jobs, big driver of the economy in Queens. And we want to make sure that our culturals are restored. And they're working overtime to make sure that more visitations happen. And I think we've made a lot of headway. And my big issue over the cuts is it seems to be this big focus on Manhattan. Not everybody's going to Manhattan. And they're not the only cultural institutions in New York City. So Queens should not be seeing such a big cut in our culturals.
Yeah, and as I told you all, this was going to be the sad song of today. The per capita funding for our cultural institutions is just way below that we should be.
Young and rich. Thank them.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, it's definitely concerning. And therefore, we come up with a recommendation of restore and enhance funding for Queens CIGs, restore and enhance funding for cultural organizations in Queens. These are the other cultural institutions that are not CIGs, and continue city council initiatives. We're gonna pass now to the Department of Parks. So Parks is getting where's the total here? It's getting a $4.5 million dollar cut. This is it's a severe budget cut, but it's not that substantial compared to other agencies. The majority, the concern is that they're getting 5 million budget cut in forestry and horticulture, which includes tree pruning and other programs. We're gonna make sure to push also for maintenance operation Queens to be increased. We're getting a 4.3 million cut for those for that purpose here. So we have a lot of recommendations for this department. Increase the number of personnel in Queens, increase funding for street pruning, particularly, increase funding for more trees, increase funding for sidewalk repairs, increase capital funding support for Queens parks, increase capital funding for the creation, preservation, and adaptation of open space and new parks, provide capital funds to create bioswales and other solutions to address flooding problems throughout Queens, implement revenue opportunities to fund parks infrastructures and maintenance, and as well, continue city council initiatives. After this, we're going to the small businesses, a small business services agency, which is experiencing a lot of budget cuts. It's experiencing they're budgeted right now 173 or 174 million dollars for fiscal year 25, which is a budget cut of 109.6 million dollars compared to fiscal year 24. It's concerning particularly because the biggest cut is contract services, which is Economic Development Corporation, which is graffiti removal, those kind of services that help maintain our storefronts. As well, neighborhood development is getting a big cut as well. Workforce development, these are definitely services that help our neighborhoods to be as special as they are, and we want to see that continue. The recommendations for this agency are expand resources for small businesses impacted by COVID, because unfortunately our business is still hurting from this pandemic. Restore funding for agency administration and operations to facilitate everything to move in a fast pace. Restore funding for business, workforce, and neighborhood development, and enhance funding for storefront grant programs to maintain, a neighborhood visibility, as well as continue city council initiatives. Now, we're going to pass to CUNY, the City University of New York. Is experiencing several cuts on personnel. They're getting 27.1 million dollar cut, and OTPS is 161 million dollars. This brings the total to 188 million dollars of cut. So that's always concerning, as the VP mentioned. We need to be doing a little bit more for our schools. So our recommendations for this is increase capital budget for for CUNY Queens campuses, restore and enhance funding for CUNY in Queens, for Queens and York colleges. They're concerned that they need the big support of our push to restore their funding. Again, it's very, very concerning the place where CUNY is at right now, and continue city council initiatives. So now we're going to go to the Department of Environmental Protection. As you can see, they're budgeted at $1.6 billion for fiscal year 24 right now. That is a $55.1 million cut comparatively for fiscal year 24. The biggest cut of them is miscellaneous, which shouldn't be super concerning. However, miscellaneous might be any emergency type of work that might need to be done. Another sewer maintenance is getting $5.6 million budget cut, as well as customer services and water board support. Upstate water supply also is getting a 21.7 million cut. That's the water that most of us drink.
The add-on maintenance, which is absurd, being that number one complaint we get here, especially during major storm events, is the need to make sure catch basins are cleaned out, to make sure that they're operating, and to see cuts there is ridiculous on the maintenance side. And we're working with our city council partners. Once again, I had passed legislation while I was in the council, which required them to clean the basins out more regularly. They were going by federal government requirements, and we needed to see them cleaned out more regularly. So we're hoping to pass that legislation again. But secondly, we know the number one complaint we get, especially as we see these more frequent storms, is the need to make sure our catch basins are cleaned out more frequently. So to see any cuts on maintenance is shameful, especially for our borough, in light of us losing people and losing lives during storms. We need to see more frequent cleanup and more frequent maintenance of basins. Not to say they're the magic bullet. We need the Army Corps to step up. I'm heading to Connecticut in a few days to see what they did out there. But in light of that, that doesn't mean the Department of Environmental Protection shouldn't be doing more. We need to see an increase in maintenance on our catch basins, not a decrease.
And that's the recommendation number one we have here, BP, is increase the amount of workers to clean catch basins, increase capital funds for sewer improvements, invest in more solar programs and green infrastructure, address groundwater contamination issues, invest in noise pollution mitigation efforts, and as well as city council initiatives to be continued. We're almost done. We have a couple agencies more to go over, and we should be going to the Q&A portion. Next, we have the Department of Social Services, which includes the Human Resources, includes HOA, and also DSS, and DHS are within this agency. As you can tell, they're having a $666.2 million cut overall for this preliminary budget. The total right now they're being funded is at $10.8 billion. Definitely concerning given the situation that we're experiencing with, asylum seekers and migrants. We definitely need to fully restore and enhance funding for the Department of Social Services, enhance funding for food stamp programs and also increase the response time on those. Within this department, you see a lot of programs that are operated through the Department of Homeless Services, with DHS, and the biggest cuts are adult shelter operations is $4.2 million, followed by family shelter operations at $25.1 million cut. Administration is getting a big hit of $108.1 million, and outreach, drop-in, and reception services is experiencing a $7.6 million cut. This is the total again. The total for the homeless services department is going to be $3.9 billion, and it has a $144 million cut. Again, we don't think it's a time to be doing this type of cuts for this type of program. So what we're asking and we're pushing is the restore funding for outreach, drop-in, and reception services, restore funding for family shelter operations, fund the creation of fund a creation of a migrant processing center in Queens, just because there's none. Everyone has to travel to Manhattan to get the services they need. Add resources for transgender and gender non-conforming people, and continue to city council oversight and initiatives, definitely particularly the oversight portion of this. And yep, with that, I'm happy to say finally we finished the presentation. And we'll go over in order just to hear your thoughts, comments, recommendation, edits. Again, this is just a draft, and we're gonna work on what you recommend today to be added, and I'll make sure to deliver both digitally and printed versions of the book for you all. Khalil, how do you wanna? Yeah. Oh, well, yes, we can do it.
Questions, comments, or concerns?
Ideas, edits, suggestions.
Questions, comments, or concerns? Ladies first. Oh, good. All right, Heather first.
Gotcha.
I'm coming, Heather.
Oh, the mics. Oh.
So just in case you have the answer.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Okay, I got a couple, but I'll just pace myself. I'll kind of. In regards to the SCA's assessment on the schools, when it says District 28, that includes elementary, middle, and high schools?
Let me double check on this.
Because I know,
Yes, I
I know
believe
that the DOE
yes.
sees the districting differently, so I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure.
Yeah, I believe we added.
Okay, it goes K-12 and all, yes.
And can I get clarification on District 78Q? Is that supposed to be District 75? The 78Q seems to be a school, not a district. Can
So,
you clarify that for me? I'm just trying to figure that one out.
I'll find, I did reach out to, the SEA, on that, it's on their report. So it has no clear, answer on what it is, so I'm waiting for that response as we speak. So
Okay.
hopefully I thought I reached out before, but I didn't.
Okay, great. And then there was one point where you mentioned in the New York City Department of Youth and Community Development, where it's fund universal after school for elementary schools, and then it says it talks about increased funding, restore and enhance funding for out-of-school youth programs. Well, for example, one of the programs that I think is supported by the Borough President's Office is the Beacon program at Russell Sage, and that's a middle school program. So that would be, I think, classified as a youth program within a school, correct? So shouldn't that be mentioned? Just,
I mean, if you want to pull out, extract Beacon schools, we don't
Yeah.
have a problem. Actually, Beacon schools should be expanded.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, in our opinion, not that they
So-
have.
yeah,
I
I'll
was
agree
think-
with you on that.
Yeah.
Our school programs do include Compass, Sonic, and Beacon.
Okay, even if they are in a school, even if they're not off-site, even if they're on-site at a school, it makes
Yeah.
no difference.
Yeah,
It's
it
a,
makes no
it's a
difference.
distinction without a difference.
Exactly.
Okay, okay, great. And then question about school safety in regards to crossing guards. Are crossing guards folded into the school safety number? Is it, what bucket in the NYPD does that sit in? Because I know last year.
And that was during my tenure as public safety chairman to move them over to DOE. That did not happen. So they remain in PD. So if that's something you want us to add, we don't have a problem doing that as well.
Yeah, because I don't think my district is unique. I think my district is like everybody else's. We have just very few schools that get coverage. We have one school that's across the street from the precinct, so we get the benefit of having their person do that. But
Problem is retention and pay for school crossing guards.
yeah,
We did a lot of work to even ensure that they can simply use the bathroom in the schools because they weren't able to do that before we were public safety chair
yeah.
during that period. So we can definitely push for the increase, but the big problem is the pay. And the union will tell you that. So it's very hard to attract
Of
people
course.
who are going to stand outside, while your kid's in school all day. So I mean, we don't have a problem adding that.
No, no.
That shouldn't, but we should also increase their pay so
just
that we
wondered-
can actually hire people who want to work at school.
I just wonder-
Problem with the shortages.
Yeah,
There are just not enough people who want to work the job to stand outside during the winter, not be able to use the bathroom, which now they can. But the bottom line is the pay is really the big problem.
right. And outside of our scope, I mean, really is maybe rethinking the role and thinking about sort of how they can extend the role into more of like not just outside, but also maybe doing traffic on the inside of school so that it makes it a more robust job that goes throughout the day that, because I think we keep hearing the same thing. I mean, you've probably been hearing it longer than I have, the same story over and over again. It's hard to, once we got them, then it's hard to keep them, and so I think maybe it's time that we start rethinking how we design the role. That's just my own
I agree.
personal opinion.
2000%.
I'm just trying to see if I have anything.
We'll make sure
else.
to add that recommendation because it's also on the top priorities of Community Board 13, 11, and 6. So we'll make sure to add that.
Thank you, but that's it for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I think Frank was next.
Frank. Don't be too long.
Try my best. Try my best.
Cherry as well.
All right. Hello, everybody. Good to see you guys all again. the first one I have is, the Department of Aging. Uh, the, food cuts, to the aging. It seems like in this budget that a lot of stuff is, against our residents, taxpayers and people that have been, here, the cuts, even this cut of, I think it's 15,000, or 20, the total cut is $36,000. A lot of these seniors depend on these meals, and this is the only meal they get. It's a shame what's happening out here. I'm in, Board 3, East Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, and, North Corona. And this is what's happening. I mean, the food, we call it food insecurity now.
Mhm.
We used to call it starvation. I'm 61, so we used to call it starvation. And I think that that's something that really needs to be addressed. The children's services, another cuts, and also the youth and community development. These are unacceptable. I mean, these kids are hurting now. And one thing I don't understand is when we say youth services or youth programs, how come there's vocational programs that are not put out there? Because everyone is not going to college. College is not for everyone. I understand that. I have my degree, but it's different. People can learn how to be carpenters, tradesmen, tradespeople, excuse me, tradespersons, I should say, be politically correct, right? And this would gives a person a job that they can provide a family and pay their taxes and get some of that affordable housing that I don't think is so affordable. Every program that we seem to do in Community Board 3, it seems that it's the rent is 2,500 or more. That's not affordable. The formula keeps getting more convoluted and convoluted. It's just not right. I'm going to end with this because I don't want to take up all your time. I have a lot of problems with this budget. NYPD, as many people know, I'm law enforcement or retired law enforcement, 17 years. What has happened is, in my humble estimation, in my humble opinion, the police were cut when I was there. It was 40,000, 42,000. There were, I think, 12,000 corrections at that time. Those numbers are drastically down. So what happens is that you have NCOs, like if you look at the NYPD, if you look at the crime stats for NYPD and look at my precinct, the 115th, all those stats are up. Okay. And the reason why they're up is because the NCOs that we had during the pandemic, which was great, which the BP pointed out, they have now been reassigned to do patrols.
Mhm.
So if you're reassigning for patrols, you don't have those officers that are going to pick up the phone and say, okay, where you at? What's the problem? And everything else. So that's a big problem. Maybe the overtime's a problem too. I don't know. That's above my pay grade. I don't get into that. But if you have a TO of a precinct that's supposed to be 100 and you only have 75, which we know is that's the case. When Mr. Trump was president, a lot of officers left Queens, went to Manhattan, did other things, never came back. Then the numbers are just down as far as hiring police. Then there's also different things where people don't want to be police. My father was one of the first Black detectives in New York City, first grade detectives. So it was proud to be a police officer. Now all that's changed. And I think that we have to see that. I got one more thing. DEP, I thank you for running the program the other night over at in Queens. I was at the deaf school in
Mhm.
Lexington. That's a program that they don't need cuts. I think they need supervision. Okay, they're running another program to see what needs to be done to the catch basins, where they already did one that was completed in 2004. So we're doing another study now on top of that study, and there's been no action. But yet, I don't know who takes care of the Whitestone here. but they just did the project in the Whitestone for the sewer system. Meanwhile, I'm in East Elmhurst and we're the catch basin, and they have no time. They have a 10-year time frame to do something over here. You know, BP, I'm glad you're here. Okay, you know I have a lot of confidence in you and over time. But all this, we need action. These agencies are not acting. And to keep doing study after study after study, what is that doing? We're losing people. We're losing properties. People are losing their homes. And we're standing there. Okay, we're doing another study. I'm sorry, I don't want to take a picture.
Yeah, I just,
And I am happy to see that so on the education piece on vocational CTE programming is definitely being expanded, and that's a big emphasis of us, even with the new schools coming up. We want to see specialties a part of those schools. So film school coming up and on Northern Boulevard, what we'll see on Hillside Avenue. And I'm proud of a lot of the work that the chancellor has been focused on CTE. And we want to continue to see those programs expanded. So you call them vocational, but CTE is a big focus of the chancellor.
What I'm talking about was construction. We need construction guys. That's vocational.
CTE. So they don't call it vocational. So for instance, we have the construction trades high school in Richmond Hill. And there are schools who are focusing in on specialties, automotive, for instance. We're probably going to build out automotive in Far Rockaway High School, for instance, comes to mind. One of the last places we need to build out in that school. So we're looking at all of these things, but I do want to commend the chancellor on this CTE piece, because that wasn't a big focus in the past. And no, everybody's not going for a 4-year degree. We want to see people certified even in aviation, which is why we're working with Aviation High School. August Martin High School is a big one on that front as well, and tech, which we'll have a lot more to say about in the days to come. On DEP, there is a lot of progress, but not enough progress. And, we're going to continue to work with this Biden infrastructure money. And unfortunately, yes, these studies do have to take place because the pipes are this small in some places. And once again, we've seen extreme population growth. We've seen a boom in housing, whether it's one or two, we could argue some legal, some not legal. So we do need to see infrastructure continue to be advanced in places like Elmhurst. We will have more to say in the days to come on Peck Avenue, in Flushing, for instance, where the DEP has come up with some NDDC with some creative solutions. Southeast Queens, once again, we have $2 billion, which we secured. So we know that those projects are moving forward. But with the pace of climate change, it's not getting easier, right? With these more frequent and horrendous rainstorms, part of the solution is also the Army Corps, which we're leaning on a lot to think about, not just bay flooding, but also inland flooding. So we need to really see more solutions on those ends. And we're going to continue to work with our federal partners on that. But absolutely, I'm hoping they will come back with a more strategic plan, because you're right, it's taken too long. In Elmhurst, you have low-lying areas. We're dealing with the groundwater pressures as well, all right? Because we enjoyed 60 degrees Saturday. I always say we're gonna pay for it, enjoy it, but it costs, right? As New York City sees just as many 90-degree days as Atlanta, we're gonna pay for it. So a lot of work that continues to need to be done in this area, but I am confident that DEP and DDC are really working. I can't speak for any other borough, but definitely doing hard here. And we were just out in Douglaston, Bayside just a few days ago, doing a tour as well, just making sure that some of it doesn't take rocket science. It's just making sure that our infrastructure is working. But then in a lot of areas, we have not kept up with the pace of growth in the borough. in terms of the infrastructure. So TBD, no perfect, no magic bullet. Quite frankly, when it rains, I don't sleep. Once again, y'all sleep. I'm up 3 in the morning monitoring. But the bottom line, no magic bullet. We need a lot more money. Just like we got the 2 billion for Southeast Queens, we need to see that replicated in other parts of the borough. Forest Hills, another place, because sometimes we get caught up. Oh, it's just our section. It's a problem. We're seeing ponding and flooding in places we've never seen in Queens. So a lot more work to be done, and pulling down those federal infrastructure dollars as well. And the Army Corps also being a main part. Betty.
Hold on, just quickly, I'm sorry, VP, because we do have our chairperson 5, Gary online as well.
And we want to get through this because I got an event in my event started downstairs.
Gary,
Betty.
we'll go quickly, we'll
Started
go
already?
to Sherry,
I gotta get
and then
out.
we'll go to
Okay.
Betty.
So let's make it precise,
We
concise,
do
so I
have
can get through
our
everything and
chairperson 5,
get downstairs for
Gary
all 400
online as
people.
well.
And we want to get through this because I got an event in my event started downstairs.
Gary,
Betty.
we'll go quickly,
Started
we'll go
already?
to Sherry,
I gotta
and
get
then
out.
we'll go to
Okay.
Betty.
Is Gary
Let's
online?
make it precise,
Oh.
concise,
do
so I
have
can get through
our
everything and
chairperson 5,
get downstairs for
Gary.
all.
What is Gary saying? Because I don't hear. I don't understand.
Gary,
Oh,
can you
oh.
repeat?
Hello,
You can repeat it for whatever his question is or comment. Okay.
hello.
Can you repeat your question, please?
This is Chairman Arcuri from Board 5. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so you have our testimony. In addition to that, in relation to hospitals, I'd ask that you include Wyckoff Heights Medical Center, which is just on the border of Brooklyn, that 38% of its population that it services comes from Queens. So when you're looking at adding hospitals and services to those hospitals, please add Wyckoff Heights Medical Center. Otherwise, I agree with the budget the way you propose. Thank you.
Yeah,
I agree. And I'm supposed to get to that hospital. We should make sure I visit it
it
as
is
well.
included though.
Because he mentioned that last year.
If you look at the page at the bottom, it says Wyckoff Heights Medical Center accounts for 324 beds in Brooklyn. And although residents of Southwest Queens do utilize this hospital, there is no way to track who's from Queens or Brooklyn. So that's the
Thank you.
problem. What can I include?
Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna go to Sherry and then to Betty.
Sherry to Betty.
Okay. A couple of things I mentioned, I see was mentioned before, so I'm happy to hear the borough president is thinking on the same line that we're thinking of the things that we need to be restored. A couple of things with our community boards. We haven't received additional funding in, I think, over 5 years. So it's something we'd like to see. While we do more with less, we'd like to do more with more. That would be great. We also had a lot of people requests, saying there's issues with hospital beds when the holidays and the cold season arrives, and they've been asking. We also email all our council members requesting that this is something they consider in the budget. We find within our community board, we have a great need for middle school. And also, as a parent with a special need child, there's no D75 middle school nearby, which is something that we really need to look into. While we have elementary school, we don't want our kids traveling on buses for miles to get to District 75 middle school, because we really need one. And we also, Department Youth Community Development, we need more after-school programs, increasing funding for summer youth employment, which is something I think we're on the same page. Also with the sanitation, our superintendent Insurola has done a great job. He continue to help us with the illegal dumping on Babbage and Bessemer, and they go above and beyond. But we would like to see an extra sweeper in our board, especially for places like Jamaica Avenue that needs constant cleaning. We also want to make sure our police department is fully funded and fully staffed. One of the problems we're having is that with the all-out program, the police are always taken away during the warm months and when we need them. We were asked, well, when exactly do you need them? As you could tell, we had the drive-by random murders that happened in Queens that you had the vigil for. You don't know when you need them. We need them all the time. So we'd like to keep them in our, we'd like to keep them there. So while they're staffed, if you're pulling them out, we're really not staffed, fully staffed. With the Queens Public Library, we'd like a little help with, I just heard you mention you fully funded the libraries. That's
Close all
great
the
to hear.
gaps. Mhm.
You filled in the gaps because we have
For
Richmond
expansion.
Hill Library that we're still
Put
waiting.
money into Richmond, yep.
It keeps being pushed back for
We
the,
close the gap, so they're not, so the big push is to make sure DDC is moving these projects forward.
yes, we were a little concerned about funding as inflation has basically tripled. And I also want to take this opportunity since I hear so many people saying that they're so happy that you put $3 million into Phil Risotto Park. I just want to say you made a community very happy for a park that hasn't had any investment until a long time. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for fighting for Queens. I've only lived in Queens since I came to this country. So my thing is that Queens is the best borough. And I think we are underserved and I think we do amazing things with the funding that we get, but we do deserve more funding. And I want to thank you for fighting for that.
When
Thank you.
Mayor Adams comes to y'all should all say the same thing. Everybody should be on the same page. Queens needs its fair share of funding. I can't get political. And then also, if you have a recommendation of a school where you believe a D75 should go, please get that to us so we can work on that. If you have any ideas on the middle school side.
Constructing at 120th and Jamaica where the old Rubies were.
Yep.
But we already have a District 75 school at PS 254 at Forest Park.
Mhm.
We could do it at D75 middle school.
All right, so you should follow up with us because we don't need to wait for any capital construction to really request that.
Yeah, if you send me an
Alright.
email, I'll loop the right people in.
Yeah, so just if you have recommendations, getting those to us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Iraq, for the work that you've done on this draft. I'd like to make the motion that the Borough Board approve the preliminary draft budget response for Queens with the understanding that the Borough President will incorporate the comments made here today in his further discussions with the council.
Sound like
Mayor
they want to get out of here.
There's
I
the
see.
motion. Is there a second?
Who seconds it?
I second that.
They got to be store, so you say the beat that.
And Mr. BP, I'll second Betty's motion.
You have no complaints, CB 13? Very little? Okay.
Again, our precinct, I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
We got-
exactly.
we got our precinct.
Just want to mention that this came up, I think that thank you. I think the district manager mentioned to someone in your in your office that if the Creedmoor facility is going to expand, that the sanitation facility that's right near Creedmoor needs to be upgraded.
So we're doing an environmental impact statement. We're gonna definitely question things around sanitation, police, fire, so nothing gets done without. We're in the very preliminary stages where the EIS will get done and we'll be coming back to the community in the days to come. So we look forward to more conversations as we get more scientific on what the site looks like.
But Mr. BP, I just heard from Councilmember Lee and the other elected officials that 200 beds added were going to be added. They're not coming.
They're not getting added.
Not
That's
getting
not
added.
true. So there are new 200 beds being added at the Creedmoor site. The administration rang me. They were considering, so that's without a doubt, that's factual, but that's not, it's off the table. All right. Capital numbers for which thing? We can give you capital numbers, but once again, police department is not seeing any astronomical cuts, if any cuts
So,
at all.
Yeah, I just want to say we did have a motion that was.
All right, hold on.
We did
Let's
have
get
to
to the
vote.
questions quick. We're gonna get to the motion.
With all of our recommendations, by the way. I do see that you wanted to create, probably more funding for bioswale,
Yes.
which is great. But the issue in my district is that they're not being maintained. There's a lot of garbage. I don't know
That's
if
a
you're
good
gonna
point.
add that in there.
That's a good point.
The
We should
maintenance of
add maintenance of bioswales.
And the other thing is I saw that you were able to create, I guess, another location for the 109th precinct. It's gonna expand.
Well, we're doing a study right now, so we'll see what comes back once the police department finishes their study on the possibilities of the precinct.
Is there any way you could do that for the 110th precinct?
Jesus Christ. It was not even 1%. I can say it took us 40 years. And let me just add that I twisted a lot of arms to get that done. We will continue to twist arms, but the mere fact that we do have the 109, it's you know, false expectations here. One of the reasons, one of the stories that was convincing was obviously we have this point coming online. We already have changes between Flushing and other parts of College Point. So there was actually, you know, there's a story to be told there. There are challenges there. I don't want to promise everybody's gonna, it's not, and even after they finish the study, remember, I had to find 92, which turned into 110 million. So, which is a mayoral ask. Then I got Flushing, Meadows, Kelowna. I got to deal with now to try to get a satellite for. So I don't want people thinking around the table that we just going to be building precincts every day.
Right.
But the 109 does have, based on what we anticipate will be population growth. If the casino comes in as well, with the soccer stadium coming in, there's a nexus to why we would need an additional precinct. In for most of our precincts, we're in very close touch with our new police commissioner, who's a good friend, to make sure that those resources are reaching, especially the precincts where we see the most challenges. So no magic bullet, but if you want us to, I don't want to say we should include it. I need to study it a little bit more because I don't want to give people false expectations.
Thank you.
Got it. A motion was made, so
All right, hold on. We're going to go to Reverend Phillips, who will have the last comment before we vote this out.
In the report that my district manager put out, I added, and I'm just reiterating, when we're doing our parks projects, can we please include the comfort stations to be added in these projects so that we don't have to keep coming back? It should be.
So it's comfort stations, you got to prioritize because the comfort stations could cost more than even redoing the park.
Okay.
So comfort stations are extremely expensive. So if you have dire parks, we don't need to even include it in this. We just need to know. We can work with our city council partners on trying to prioritize. But what I would say is, what is the price tag going for a comfort station? Like 5 to 10 million?
Yeah, depending on the
And,
type.
and I think I'll get my Jamaican uncle to do it for 100,000. But the city won't accept that. So some of these costs are ridiculous. So I would say just prioritizing the ones that are in dire straits so that we can work on those. So I know, for instance, we work with Councilmember Brooks Powell. She fully got funding for one for Brookfield Port, an additional one. But if you have,
We do.
ones that are in dire straits, we just need to have that so we can push
Rochdale.
Parks, who was in here today, to make sure that they're prioritizing, but they're not cheap. I don't want, because the
Also-
biggest thing is to make sure all the parks that are underfunded are getting the funding they need right now.
One last thing, we have a library on Foch and Sutphin Boulevard.
Which
The
library?
The Baisley Park Library.
Funded Baisley.
The work is being done, but it is not ADA compliant for
No,
those.
so at our budget hearing, he mentioned that people are no longer gonna have to go upstairs, so they're correcting that issue. So
Okay.
Dennis testified to that, so that issue is resolved, as far as what Dennis has said to me. So the staff will no longer have to go upstairs and climb steps. like they are working on that issue
Okay,
to make sure they don't have to do that.
we need them to come back to the board and let us know how that's.
Yeah, he testified, at our hearing, we mentioned it, and he testified that issue, I think you brought it up in your testimony.
Yes,
You might have left, but he said that issue is being resolved.
and the one last thing is if they're cutting adult literacy, but they're increasing ESL, that doesn't make any sense. There needs to be a balance. You
So
can't
that's
cut-
why we added it in our points. We believe, I believe you did, right? So all those things we need to do is some negotiations. So the mayor can propose, he has the right to propose what he wants. And then we have to work with our council partners. And then obviously our response will be looked at to try to fight these cuts. But I am extremely serious about making sure, especially since Queens has seen the largest influx. I'm not blaming everything on migrants because some of the cuts have nothing to do with migrants, as we all know. And people can try to use migrants as, their to make political points or their pinatas, but that's not what we're doing here. So a lot of work to be done to make sure these cuts are restored. And I know for a fact that many of my colleagues who we speak to on the council side are very passionate about seeing a lot of these cuts restored that are unnecessary, by the way. So we've seen the administration backpedal on a lot of the cuts in recent days, and we're going to continue to fight against those. So
Thank you.
All right.
Before you close the meeting, I passed my card. I don't know if all of you got it. If not, I'll give you some. I have more cards in my office. Send me any questions that you have, like the capital
Questions,
question.
comments, or things
Yeah,
you want us
please-
to add
please-
in, and we
Please
will
send that
do
to
it.
me as well. If anything that comes up later on, and I'll make sure to revise it.
And when is your deadline?
For that, if they can send it by next Friday, will be perfect because we have to deliver this response by the 24th.
All right, with that being said, we're now going to call, all right, we had a motion and we had a second.
So we're gonna go around to the vote. We're gonna start with Community Board 1. Right here, please state your name and your vote.
I'm Community Board 7.
Committee, Tom Ryan, Committee Board 1, we vote yes.
2. Don't we have more mics, guys? Okay, right, got it, right. Yeah, just one side and there's
I'm Rosamund Giannoutzos. I'm here for Anatole Ashraf, our chairperson, and we vote yes.
all right.
Community Board 3, Frank Taylor, Chairman. We're voting no.
Okay. 3 voted no.
Community Board 4, Chairperson Marilena Giampino, we vote yes.
Thank you.
Community Board 5, he votes for.
Said 4?
In favor.
Okay.
All right.
Heather Demetriadis, Queens Community Board 6, we vote yes.
7.
Frank Macchio representing Gene Kelty, Community Board 7, we vote yes.
Martha, 888.
Martha Taylor, Community Board 8, yes.
All right.
Sherry Algrado, Community Board 9, absolutely yes.
All right.
Eddie Brayton, Community Board 10, yes.
Alder Better, Community Board 11, we vote yes.
12, Reverend Thorpe's.
Reverend Thorpe, CB 12, we vote yes with the necessary corrections.
Brian Black, Community Board 13, vote yes.
Dolores Orr, Community Board 14 votes yes.
How should I vote? I don't know. So, yes. All right, we'll tally.
I think it's 14 yes and 1 no.
13, yes. 13, yes. Oh, 14, right. That's right, including me. All right. So the yays have it. All right, seeing, thank you all for attending today's borough board. I will see you all. Love you all. Got it downstairs.